One more segment left to go here on this Monday edition of Bang the Book Radio. That is with Mr. Joe Everett from NFL Draft Bible for our NFL Week in Review and Monday Night Football Preview. Joseph, how's it going today, man?
Going well, Adam. Finally got things a little bit figured out in NFL, and I'll just admit it's largely because the chalk is really starting to pay off.
Yeah, it is, man. All right, so I got to do this again. I know I talked about this at the start of last week's show, but I have to do this again. The Cleveland Browns, man, it is very hard for me to not be able to say what I want to say on this show because I want to try to keep it professional and not sound like what I sounded like yesterday in front of my parents, no less, who were over for dinner. But this team, how the hell, how, why? I don't get it, man. Like, they're finding incredible ways not just to lose games, but to fail to cover games. Like, this franchise is an embarrassment in every way, shape, and form.
Yeah, the lack of covers is very frustrating on our ends, but just from a football perspective, there's obvious Myles Garrett is finally, at least you've got a draft pick in there, but yeah, the mistakes and boy, losing Emmanuel Ogba, I forget if it's a torn Achilles or what, but he's done for the year, and that makes you want to rip your hair out because he was having a breakout season, I thought. Just really making some plays and just kind of validating that high draft selection too. But ultimately, yeah, it's a whole lot of failure going on out there in Cleveland. And, yeah, I know it's got to be hard to take, man.
And the thing that really pisses me off the most about it is that for the longest time, I tried to pretend that the Browns don't exist because I always had a chip on my shoulder about how, the Indians had no margin for error with this fan base. Anytime they made a decision that didn't work out, people blasted them. The Browns, it's like they have this endless string of, oh, that's okay, they'll be better, or, well, they'll be fine next year, or whatever else. Only over the last couple of years has this team actually been taken to task for all of the bad decisions that it's had. So I had a chip on my shoulder for the longest time that the Browns would get a pass and the Indians wouldn't. And, of course, I'm a diehard Indians fan. But I spend a lot of my Sundays running errands because there are still idiots out there in this city that watch a lot of Browns games. So I'll go to the grocery store or if we got to run errands at the mall or whatever else because no one's out, So the last 2 weeks are the 2 weeks I've decided to watch the Browns because I had them in the Super Contest the last 2 weeks. And I have a newfound, I don't even want to say hatred, but just a discontent for the people that actually watch this thing week after week after week. Like, I watched it for 2 weeks, and I wanted to hang from a shower curtain rod. And there are people that actually watch this every single week, and they pay for it too. For the life of me, I can't figure it out, man. Not only will I never bet on the Browns again, I will never watch a Browns game again unless I'm at a bar and it's on or someone invites me over. I will never have the Browns on in my house again.
Commercial where it's some people like drinking spoiled milk or sleeping in poison ivy or getting paper cuts on their tongue. This team, the first half and second half differences, those collapses are probably the worst of it all. I thought Indianapolis was a first half team. I thought the Falcons were a first half team, but no, the Browns told everyone to hold their beer and we're going to show you what a real collapse is.
All right. And I'll say this, too. I mean, if you're somebody that just follows and watches the Browns, like, you have to think the NFL is the absolute worst thing on the planet because they make it look so bad. I know everyone always brings up that question of, well, what would a line between Alabama and the Browns be? And, yeah, I know the Browns would win the game, but I'm fully convinced they wouldn't cover. I don't know what the number would be, but I'm fully convinced that they would find a way not to cover. And I don't know. I mean, maybe they'd find a way to lose if DeShone Kizer turned the ball over 17 times like he seems to do every other week. All right, anyway. All right, let's go to two teams that actually know how to play the game of football. The Atlanta Falcons and the Seattle Seahawks. We're only going to spend a couple minutes on Monday Night Football here because we've got less lead time prior to the game since we had some of those issues with the site earlier on. But, Joe, are you surprised to see Atlanta now a 1-point favorite at several shops out there in the marketplace for the trip to battle the 12th man?
No, and I'm just a little frustrated. I didn't jump on this earlier. I thought that the line was kind of wrong. Just the simple fact of those injuries, and I've got to go back on. I was really still liking the Seahawks team, even without that Earl Thomas injury and going forward. But you take away Richard Sherman, and now that Cam Chancellor's out for the year, Earl Thomas, who's going to be playing at less than 100%, that he can't cover up for all the mistakes that Byron Maxwell, Shaq Griffin, Jeremy Lane are the corners now. Who can match with Julio Jones? I just don't see it. They've got Falcons have got speed and Taylor Gabriel. Mohamed Sanu playing really well for the Falcons. He's just a big physical type of receiver, so they've just got a great mix there. Devontae Freeman's out. He's not past the concussion protocol, and that's difficult because he's got the special vision. He's got that great wiggle, but they'll be fine with Tevin Coleman. I think they stay ahead of the chains. I mean, this passing game will keep things close. It's prime time. I see Julio going off, and if I'd expect anything, some big chunk plays by Tevin Coleman and Taylor Gabriel. I guess, Coleman with the breakaway threat and Gabriel with that speed, that's probably a decent look for player props and just yardage, not receptions or touches necessarily. But if someone's going to break off a big play, it'd be those two. Other side of the ball, I mean, Dwayne Brown hasn't practiced this week at all, so Adrian Claiborne, the rich get richer, he's going to go up against Jermaine Ifedi or Reese Ayambo, whoever it is. I mean, Claiborne's not going to get 6 sacks again, but he's only 2 sacks away from like a $1.25 million escalator, if memory serves. So he's going to be hungry, and that's an issue for Seattle. The speed of the Falcons' defense, I think, is still legit. You've got guys like Vic Beasley, Deion Jones, Keanu Neal. These guys can all run, and it's just that's where the issue will be. I think where Seattle definitely wins still. Jimmy Graham, if it's Keanu Neal or Deion Jones, he still has that size, that length. That'll be what to watch on that side of the ball. And I don't know. I mean, Russell Wilson, of course, he's going to do all his dancing. He's going to make magic happen in the backfield because he has to. The line is that much of a problem without. Dwayne Brown was supposed to be some solvent there, but even then, how convinced you are of the fit, and now that he's not there, it's that'll be where Seattle's just going to have difficulty sustaining those drives. So, yeah, I definitely like the Falcons, even though it's down to a pick, and I don't know. I mean, I'm sitting there thinking maybe the teaser, but in reality, I had a pretty decent week in the NFL, so I may just Falcons pick them over 46 parlay. Let's go get rich, boys.
Well, and I kind of wonder with the Falcons here, too. I mean, Steve Sarkisian's had a lot of trouble with this team. I mean, this offense isn't as potent as it has been in the past. They've had a lot of red zone issues. They're still moving the ball in chunks. They still have about 6 yards per play, but they haven't maximized those scoring opportunities. Something I kind of wonder here this week, because you've got Dan Quinn, because he has that familiarity with this Seahawks defense, with the personnel, even with some of those guys out in the secondary, still knows the types of players that Seattle likes to get. Maybe that's a little bit of a hidden advantage for Atlanta here in that it's an easier game plan for Sarkisian because his head coach knows so much about the team.
That's definitely what I like about it. Just like you mentioned, I mean, sure, the results are much different in the win-loss column for the Falcons and definitely ATS, but they're still making big plays. There's still a ton of talent on this offense, and you just can't ignore that, especially with these injuries. And as you mentioned, that familiarity, they're going to know just how to hit them, and I think this will be Sarkisian hiding up in that booth. This might actually be, for a change, really a good game for his side of the ball and just a great opportunity in conference for the Falcons here.
All right, so let's get into our week in review here for Week 11. I know that before we actually touch on some of the things that we saw on Sunday here and Thursday, going back to the Tennessee Titans loss, you wanted to revisit some of the topics that we talked about last week.
Well, just real quick, because I had to smile watching on Sunday. We got a few right there on point. The Saints were rolling. We were all about the Jaguars' defense, keeping them in games. The Eagles crushing, and then, of course, the Cowboys, when we mentioned this, they can't play defense without Sean Lee, and I think a lot of that kind of came to fruition. I say this only because I'm about to backtrack on 3 teams. I was all about back in just weeks ago. Basically, go over a lot of what I got wrong here, so I wanted to be sure to remind folks that I didn't get them all wrong.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the things that we saw here in Week 11, and let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs with a what sort of adjective would you use to describe that performance against the New York Giants? Because that was abhorrent. I mean, as bad as the Browns are, you kind of come to expect it. But Kansas City, off of a bye, with Andy Reid, who's so good off of a bye, they lose 12-9 to the Giants. Like, what the hell's going on there?
Where have all the good times gone? They got caught in a tight game here, but that doesn't excuse what's been happening just the last month. I mean, and then this is a non-conference opponent they rarely see. The Giants really got a big turnover earlier. They love doing this interior shovel pass with Kelsey, and for once it just bounced right off his hands into the defender's mitts. I mean, they only get a field goal off of that, but then the trick play by Kelsey, I don't know if it's a matter of trying too hard or what, but two things that stick out, like Kareem Hunt only has like 18 touches or something in the game, is a mystery to me. And then the Chiefs' defense is just slow. They don't have any punch off the edge. D4 didn't play. Justin Houston just looks old. They've got problem tackling in space, and boy, it feels blasphemous to say this, but Derek Johnson is just a shell at his former self. So I give the Giants credit if they had some come to Jesus meeting, or we have to fix this now. They did it way too late, but it looks like they did it. The story should be that the Giants defense showed up, but to be honest, if you're really a Chiefs fan or you're looking to back them, which I still am, there's value. They've got some nice games on the schedule, but Alex Smith, he looks like he's hit a wall. He was just skipping balls, some real worm burners out there, and left a lot of plays on the field. So I think Smith, I don't know what to call it, a dead arm at this point in the year, but everything was underthrown. Even the great catch Tyreek Hill made for a 30-plus gainer, it was all him. That should have been an interception. And, yeah, if you're a defensive coordinator trying to just, game plan for this guy, you sell out short zone, leave a single high safety, and dare Smith to beat you deep, because I've got question marks if he can really do it. Unfortunate for that game, because they kind of came back. It was still within reach. I mean, this is still a decent team. It's just the dust settles. They're probably in the playoffs because the AFC West is just another just a shell of its former self kind of thing. I don't know what happened to that division, but the Chiefs definitely have some problems on defense, and I think this is just they'll get it figured out. They're just going to have to win in shootouts, and they really need to explore Alex Smith running more and running tempo like they did in that 2-minute, because that's the only way they were able to score. And it's just, with this explosive offense we saw earlier in the year, it needs to get back on track, because I don't think they're going to figure out how to stop people. So I don't know what to say here. If it's overs, I mean, they're going to have a chance against the Bills. They get the Jets, the Raiders, Chargers, Dolphins, Broncos. That's pretty favorable, but like I said, I might be looking at some overs going forward this Chiefs, because they're just going to have to keep punching and hope to be this team that scores last.
I know that a lot of people think that game manager is a pretty negative term. They put a negative connotation on it, and I mean, I guess I understand why, because a lot of times it's a guy that doesn't have a ton of talent that's just out there to not throw interceptions. When you look at the last 5 games here for Kansas City, 3.47 yards per carry for Kareem Hunt. And even if you go back to their October 8th game where he got over 100 yards, he only had 3.7 yards per carry in that one. So Kareem Hunt's basically around 3.5 yards per carry over the last 6 games, and that's been a big-time problem for Kansas City. They don't have that offensive balance anymore. So basically what you're asking Alex Smith to do is go out there and move the football for you, throwing it to Travis Kelce, who's facing, if you match him up on a linebacker, he's okay. But if he's got a corner with safety help, that's a problem for him. Tyreek Hill, obviously, you have to let him run under the ball and go get it. Alex Smith doesn't really necessarily have the arm to do that type of thing. So you kind of limit Tyreek Hill's, availability unless you've got that balance in the running game. And the Chiefs don't have that. So that's why I think we're kind of seeing what's happening to this offense and what's happening to this team overall, is that if you don't have that guy that can go out there and regularly get you 5 yards per carry, like Hunt has averaged for the season, then you're putting a lot on the shoulders of Alex Smith, and he's got 2 guys that he can throw the ball to with any kind of confidence. And all defenses know that. So, I mean, I don't know why you don't work in something a little bit different over the bye week to try and free somebody else up to maybe use some of that running back depth that you've had for the last couple of years. But, man, without an effective Kareem Hunt, the Chiefs look very pedestrian.
No, they do, and it's what's really stings of that game. Two of those big runs that Kareem Hunt had got called back for holding, penalties. It's mistakes. It's can't do right over there in Kansas City. But I agree. It's just teams basically have started to figure them out, and I still though stand by. I mean, the Giants. That is a really good defense, and what we saw was that 2016 version of Steve Spagnuolo's crew. So that's good for them. But yeah, it's definitely problems going forward for the Chiefs, and I think defense is kind of I don't want to say the book's out, but they know they'll just let Alex Smith beat them, gear down for the run, and that's definitely going to be what they're going to have to counteract going forward. They've got to make the adjustment, and so far, last two games they have not.
Well, it certainly looks like nobody had a worse Sunday than the Buffalo Bills. 54-24 against the Los Angeles Chargers. They go with Nathan Peterman. Absolute disaster of a decision. That backfired about as bad as it possibly could for Sean McDermott. And now you pretty much have no choice but to go back to Tyrod Taylor. And that's not a decision that's going to sit well within the locker room to bench a guy for a game and then go right back to him. But you obviously don't have a choice in this situation. But, man, for the Bills, a lot of people were talking about regression from this team. Offensively, they weren't very good. Their chief attribute was taking care of the football. Clearly, we see what happens when they don't do it like they haven't over the last 2 weeks. The defense has pieces and parts, but it's pretty middle of the road statistically, or at least it was until that game against the Chargers. So is this just the beginnings of the collapse for the Buffalo Bills, or can they salvage this thing?
I've got my doubts, and this is one where I've just got to fess up and apologize. I just praised the Bills not weeks ago. Love the coaching staff, like what they're doing on defense, but I can't stand behind what they did. Every player to a man's got to be looking at each other saying, like, why now? Why did they do this? We're in this race. I mean, right before Sunday, they were the 6th seed. Like, they were the second wild card, and why they make this change is a general manager, a head coach. What are you telling your players? So this is another way I'm totally confused because there's no need to tank at this point. They've got a boatload of draft picks. They could combine them, trade up, move up. They have the ammunition. They don't really need to solidify any draft slots. So there's no way they could have thought Nate Peterman was ready for this. He's a good kid, and he had a terrific senior season at Pitt. We'll acknowledge that, and that's a nice story. But nice stories don't get the job done in year one. I think that's a guy that definitely needed to sit, observe, soak it in, sponge up some information, and then maybe next year you give a shot. But if they're really trying to say we needed to get a valid look at this kid, then this smells and stinks of a disconnect between coaching and management here, because I can't believe McDermott had to make this decision. Like, this can't be just his decision. And, of course, now he's out there in the media falling on the sword. This was my decision. We still haven't evaluated this week for the quarterback position. And, yeah, for that reason, I'm off those games right now. I cannot trust this team. Where this player's psyche is at this point is a huge question mark, and that for just by itself kind of blacklists the Buffalo games for me. I mean, you basically pulled the rug underneath a team and asked them to care going forward. I can't be convinced. And, yeah, sure, Tyrod Taylor's not the future, but, Jesus, consider the alternative. Realize what your players are thinking and that there's something called morale. And right now, it's at a low this season in Buffalo, and I think anybody that can just see it, dogs can smell it. Like, wow, Bills, that was the dumbest move ever.
Well, let's talk about the other side in that game, and let's talk about the Los Angeles Chargers for a minute. So they finally play a game that's not close, which has got to be nice for them because it feels like every single Chargers game comes down to the fourth quarter. But they're 4-6 right now, and they're in second in the one-legged man ass-kicking contest at the bottom of the AFC West. They lost to Denver by 3, Miami by 2, got blown out by the Chiefs by 2 touchdowns, lost to the Eagles by 2, Patriots by 8, Jaguars by 3 on the road in a game that they should have won. So we could be looking at a Chargers team that's 5-5, and now they're a pick'em on the road in Dallas on a short week on Thanksgiving. Now that says a lot about Dallas without Ezekiel Elliott, Tyron Smith, and Sean Lee, but still, I kind of look at the Chargers here, and I'm sort of asking myself, like, is this a bye team the rest of the way?
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, this is still you got to love that defense. Gus Bradley dialing it up now, and geez, if Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram get a piece of Byron Bell and Chaz Green, that's I'd be licking my chops too. I mean, Joey Bosa may have 16 sacks in that game. Who knows? But no, this is still a good-looking team, and even the assistants on the offense. Wiz is still there. I think if a new coach had to step into a team, you've got that veteran quarterback. You've got great assistants around you. This is not a bad bye team. Like you said, the rest of the way, I think Melvin Gordon may have gotten a little dinged up, but it's still all right. And Keenan Allen, boy, he's finally healthy again and just looking great, coming off a monster game. So, things seem to be clicking for this group. I mean, they're not going to dominate any game on offense, like you said, but they have had tight games. It's difficulty covering all these spreads, but looking at their schedule going forward, I wouldn't be opposed to backing them. They get the Brownies. Redskins are still dinged, and, they're going to bring it against Kansas City. I don't think there's a question there. So, they're definitely a good look going forward.
And speaking of the Browns, I don't think it's been said enough on this segment, but they suck. All right, let's talk about this game that was at Lambeau Field here between Baltimore and Green Bay. And I got to ask you, Joe, Baltimore with this 23-0 win. Game started very slow. It was a 6-0 game at half. Was this more about Baltimore's defense, or was this more about Green Bay's offense, or lack thereof?
Oh, this is another one. I was looking for some value in the Packers just because everyone would give up. And, boy, everyone that gave up takes and move that 10 on down the road. Congratulations. It's really, I think, about a Packers team stinking. And, sure, though, the Ravens are good on that side of the ball. And just to get that out of the way, 3 shutouts this season. And we've mentioned their coaching. I think Dean Pease, that coordinator, is a head coaching candidate after this season. If he's not, then maybe he just doesn't want to be a head coach. That could be. But what they've done on that side of the ball really it deserves a lot. But Packers giving up, 5 turnovers, the fumbles, Hundley just some terrible, terrible decisions that a lot of people still said, there's some good there. There may be some good, but when you just make those boneheaded plays, it takes away everything, every good thing you've done. So it's hard to get behind the Packers team going forward, and just tough games coming up. So, but yeah, on the Baltimore side, Flacco, I think he's just regressed. This is another time, probably stress team speed too much, but Baltimore does not have a lot of it. And, they've got great special teams. They know how to stay ahead of the chains. But looking at that Texans game coming up or the Ravens Monday night, I think this is still a Ravens team. Great shutout, but I think there's worse weeks coming up for them. So I guess I'd be looking for regression from Baltimore. And, I think it's unmistakable right now. If you want to add the Packers to the blacklist, that's just probably the way to go.
All right, let's go back to last Thursday. I took the Tennessee Titans in the Super Contest. I thought it was a decent spot for them catching 7 points. And if you look at the box score here for this game, not all that bad. 5.3 yards per play for Tennessee, just 5.1 for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh had a 33-yard edge, 349 to 316. But Tennessee -4 in turnover margin. Marcus Mariota threw 4 picks for the first time in his career. Had never even thrown 3 picks in a game in his NFL career. So I don't know if I made a bad handicap or if I just got bit in the ass by variance. But in any event, Tennessee came nowhere close to covering. So with that being said, Joe, what's your takeaway from that game?
Kind of like you, it's just underlying things. This team is not that bad, and a lot of people see this game and remember the big plays and, Antonio Brown just killed him. That may well be true. But that's not the strength of this tight. They have a terrible secondary. They are going to give up some plays, and they just ran into a great group of skill position players. I don't have to tell anybody about the talent in Pittsburgh. And also, situationally, Dick LeBeau's zone blitzing scheme, they know intimately. I think Kevin Butler could probably give a doctoral-level dissertation on Dick LeBeau's defense, and Dick LeBeau would probably give him an A on it. I mean, I think that's a tough spot. They know too well how to pick that apart, and Roethlisberger, having practiced against it, it's just tough spot on the road. And even though Mariota, I think that's another bad look for them was that sky cam. You can really kind of see where Mariota just completely overthrew a couple of balls and just missed a couple of receivers. Speaking of leaving plays on the field, I just still look at this team, and once again, a division that's not all that good, a team that's got a ton of talent, a unique look at quarterback, a beefy offensive line. I think they've got a unique player too in Adoree Jackson. They're doing some really crazy stuff with him on offense, just flat out options. And I think they just ran into a bit of a buzzsaw here. Steelers defense, they deserve a ton of credit too, selling out on the run, forcing Mariota downfield, and some of these plays though Mariota made. And I think the Titans, they've still got plenty of motivation. We're getting into that playoff race. They're still the first wild card team right now. Sure, what if they don't catch Jacksonville? They're 4 games ahead: Indy, Houston, Arizona, San Francisco. I'm still looking to get on the Titans side, and I'll say if Jacoby Brissett gets cleared, he hasn't been cleared yet from concussion protocol, but the time is enough to be cleared, and T.Y. Hilton's playing for the Colts. And over in that Tennessee Indy game is probably not too bad a look there, because I know T.Y. Hilton can get open against the secondary. The Titans can run on the Colts. I'm definitely, if I had an early play for next week, that'd definitely be one.
Joe Everett from NFL Draft Bible. Joe, what's going on over at the Bible right now?
Well, truth be told, a ton of conference calls for College Gridiron Showcase. We got all these invites going out for the event. Eating up a little time, but still cranking out daily scouting reports, one every day. My latest out there is Mason Cole, left tackle for Michigan. Started on that line since day one as a Frosh. He's played center. He's played tackle. I think he'd make a fine guard at the next level. Just a gamer. Amazing streak of games played. This guy is, I think he's going to be one of those interior players that just instantly upgrades the team's offense. So we'll see. I think he's a pro's pro, compares favorably to Cody Whitehair, and then throwback to Notre Dame center Jeff Fain, if you want. He could play just like either of those guys. Check out my man Mason Cole on NFLDraftBible.com.
And if I'm right, didn't Jeff Fain play for that awful team known as the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah, they did draft him, if memory serves, but it was a good selection. I'll give him that much.
Sure. All right. Joe Everett from NFL Draft Bible. You can follow him on Twitter at Joe W. Everett. Joe, thank you so much for your time, man. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right. Looking forward to it.